Evening, folks, and welcome back to the View podcast for a bit of a special one tonight. Delighted to be joined by James Marshment, who is a Leeds fan, lifelong Leeds fan, and editor at TeamTalk as well. James covers a lot of the news stories that go around about Leeds United. So we wanted to have a chat with James because we're halfway through the season. As a Leeds fan as well, I'd love to get your take on things. But we've got a very important second half of the season, a lot at stake for Leeds and what Leeds look like in the future as well with the 49ers ownership if we don't get into the Premier League. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then we're going to get into the January business as well, whether Leeds' quiet window ends up being a quiet window, whether that's advised or not. And then some of the players that have been linked through TeamTalk already this month as well. But I want to start off first by saying thanks to James for agreeing to come on and talk to me and just check in. How are you, James? And how has your Christmas been?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. And thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. Christmas was nice. I'm not a big fan of the icy weather that's followed, but what can you do? You got to get on with it.
You do. And it's ice cold here at the moment. I'm not a fan either. I got married at the start of December, went off to the Bahamas from a honeymoon. So I had part of December in lovely heat and then came back to this again. So yeah, tough adjustment. But yeah, good. I didn't mind Christmas. James, first half of the season's done and dusted. Leeds are sitting top of the pile. Fantastic home record this season. Away record looked like it was improving and then took a big wobble again. But in a better position, at least positionally, than last season. What's your take been on the first half of the season for Leeds so far?
Do you know, I've been frustrated. I know we're top and I know it's great to sort of look down at the rest of the table, but in actual fact, there is a real sort of feeling of we should be a hell of a lot better than where we are right now. That sort of gap we had has been shut down after Mellier's errors on Saturday, which we'll come to later on. But for me, it's like you look back at the games, and I know every team has got a hard luck story. I just feel in Leeds' instance, we've had far too many already this season. I look back at that Sunderland game, 2 points dropped. I go back to Pompey on the first day of the season, 2 points dropped. And then again on Saturday, 2 points dropped. So in my eyes, I think we ought to be 6 points better off from where we are. I can forgive certain results. You know, you go to Millwall, you expect a hard game. We weren't brilliant that night, but they have got a game plan. They stuck to it. They adapted well against us. And, you know, they tactically outfought us, if you like, on the night. But, you know, it feels frustrating. There are games you can forgive, but some you can't. And the three I've mentioned really do stick in the throat. And I feel like Leeds should be a lot better off and sitting a lot prettier right now.
Yeah, a lot of the comments agreeing with that statement as well. I think, especially when you look at the manner in some of the games, and I suppose we can excuse the odd mistake here and there, and we're not, you know, we don't avoid mistakes outfield either. If you look at the goal against Blackburn, it's Dan James goes to sleep for a split second and lets the player run away from him and he scores a tap in. You go back to the Burnley game, and it's Manor Solomon falling over the ball and they break and catch Leeds on the counter. So it appears that on paper, James, if anyone's going to beat Leeds this season and stop Leeds getting promoted, it's going to be Leeds that do it to themselves.
100%. We are our own worst enemies. It's been said before. You know, last season, I think there was an element, you know, people will point the finger at Farke a little bit last season. I think there's an element of misfortune to last season. You get 90 points, 23 out of 24 times you're going up with that tally. You get to the playoff final. Okay, we ain't got a great record in that. And no one probably really thought any different to what happened. But you look back at that 90 points we were unlucky last year. I think we're on course to match that this year. However, we will probably do it the Leeds way and make a real pig's ear of it and stumble over the line when really it ought to be a lot more comfortable than what it is. And unfortunately, we're shaping up to what is going to be another 3, potentially 4 team race this year. Because, you know, last year I was saying all season, Ipswich will fall away. They won't last the course. And then this year we've got the same with Sunderland. They keep grinding out wins. I've been quite impressed with them, to be honest with you. They weren't really fancied at the start of the season, but they're pretty formidable at home, pretty much like Leeds. Bit of a sketchy away record, very much like Leeds. But what they can do, and Leeds don't seem to be able to do at the moment, is they fall on the right side of those games, which are nudging towards draws. And I feel there's an element of frustration about Leeds, and I'm sure Farke is feeling it as well. Certainly the fans are.
Yeah, and I think that frustration kind of comes out over Christmas. We're looking at the away record before Christmas, and I take issue with one thing that Daniel Farke says, and that's 2 points per game gets you promoted, because it gives the excuse to drop points away from home and then be like, well, it's still a point on the road, so it still makes 2 points. But if your home form takes a blip, you could be in big, big trouble and fall away pretty quickly. As you say, Sunderland, who were at 1 point nearly 10 points or 11 points off the pace of it, are now back within touch and distance, only 3 points behind us. It's one result for 3 teams that are right behind us. And Sheffield United have gone through their wobble spell. They've gone through their tricky spell. And due to the last 2 results from Leeds, they're still only a point behind Leeds going into the next set of matches after the FA Cup. And Burnley, as Daniel Farke says, the team with the best defence in this league usually gets promoted. And Burnley have conceded 9 goals all season and have creeped themselves up into second place. And whether people like Scott Parker or not, and I don't rate his coaching ability massively, but he does a job in this league and they have creeped right up behind Leeds. And as you say, it's very much a 4-horse race now. But James, the big thing people keep saying to me is we went on a run after Christmas last year. Now, what I say back to that is that was an almost record-setting run. It was 1 result away from being a record for the club. They don't come around that often. Do you think Leeds can get that kind of a run going again in the second half of the season? Or do you think just with the form we've got at the moment, we're still a little bit disjointed?
I think solving the away form is the first point. If we can get that right, I know there were signs prior to the whole match that we were getting things right. At home, I'm not too concerned. I think we should win more than most. I know there's that element of what happens if, we sort of do fall away at home. But generally speaking, I think we are capable of beating everyone in this league. It's just about if Leeds find themselves doing the right thing on the day. We're a little bit frustrating at times. We drop too many points, more than we need to. And, I think the club needs to probably have a little think about things in January, make a couple of adjustments, and then, see where we go from there.
That's the question, because we'll get onto the January transfer stuff in a bit in a few minutes. But just in terms of the overview of the whole thing, Leeds have a habit when it comes into the January transfer window of sitting on their hands and thinking we have enough. And then more often than not, that's come back to bite us on the backside when we've actually got to the later half of the season. Last year, I will admit, I thought we had enough even bringing in Connor Roberts. I thought we probably stacked enough elsewhere. And then the March international break comes and that brings issues with it. And that happened our last year in the Premier League as well. So that international break has been a bit of a problem for us too. You look at Burnley and Sheffield United, they're not hanging around. They're going spending some money and strengthening the areas that they do. But we keep hearing from Leeds a quiet January. Is that advisable for Leeds to be going into a January when there's so much on the line this season of a promotion to take that gamble? I get that you're in a situation where who are you bringing in now? How long are they going to be here for? Are you buying for the Premier League? Are you buying for short term? Do they want to even be here? I get all of that. But is it wise for Leeds to be publicly saying, look, it's going to be a quiet January? Because that will frustrate a lot of the fan base as well. Because there are, to me, still gaps in this squad.
Yeah, 100%. There are gaps in the squad. Is it advisable? No. I think there's an element of Leeds playing down expectations. They don't want to come out and say, yes, we're going to aim for 3 or 4 players, because A, if it doesn't happen, questions will be asked. And B, when we start sort of shouting from the rafters, we're signing players, prices get hiked. So there's a little bit of politics involved behind the scenes. I think Leeds probably, certainly under the 49ers, have played things very close to their chest. And if you contrast that to the Andrea Radrizzani era, who was towards the end anyway, certainly shouting from the rafters about, we're going to sign this player. I remember that lad came in on the plane and then he failed his medical. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
I'd rather do the 49ers approach, if I'm honest. I think things need to be kept on the hush-hush, on the down low, and largely the 49ers have done that. So when new signings arrive, here they are through the door with the shirt, great, happy days. At the same time, and on the flip side to that, I do think there's a strong element of the 49ers thinking, yes, we do have enough. We're going to save our money for the Premier League. The goalkeeper situation's a perfect example of that. I think Leeds do want a new goalkeeper, but the level of keeper they're going to attract now, it's not going to be the level of keeper they want, say, in 6 months' time in the Premier League. So, if they can get a loan in, then great. And I think that applies to a few positions across the squad. If they can get a loan in, then great. That gives you a time to look at the players if they can improve on what we have now. But then there's, do they want to be spending that money? The type of players they could potentially attract. It's different kettle of fish. In 6 months' time as a Premier League club, you're going to attract some big names. But right now, perhaps not. Players aren't inclined to move into the Championship, regardless of of the club's stature and the fact we're top of the league. So it's a really difficult one, really.
It's a tough window. I suppose everyone knows it's a tough window. Again, all the reasons that you've said. Leeds have been linked with, obviously, Emi Buendia as a possibility of coming in. He's pretty much publicly said he's not going back down to the Championship, and that's a prime example of a player who's not playing in the Premier League, knows the manager knows him, but still wouldn't come down to the Championship because he's done his time in the Championship. He's earned his stripes and he's gone on to better things, and he wants to stay at that level as much as he can. So that's understandable. It's a tricky window, but you just want a couple of clever bits of business, even if it is a senior pro. And Daniel Thaparka talks about the lack of experience in the side. And sometimes I think he over-eggs that just a little bit because I think it's not the youngest team in the league. I think it's the 7th or 8th youngest team in the division. But he's got experience on his bench, and he's possibly a couple of smart, experienced players coming in. And I suppose the goalkeeper position is probably the most prevalent one in that situation because that sets the tone for what happens in front of him. So a calm, experienced head there always goes well. But James, the goalkeeper position is a big one. It's a big talking point. I've backed Ilan Meslier for quite a while. I've said I think he's going to be a cracking goalkeeper in the future, and you don't want to bolt too early on a young goalkeeper. But the issues this season, there's been some high-profile mistakes as well as some probably basic enough goalkeeping mistakes that have been made where he should possibly do better with shots or a stronger hand on shots, and it's really not worked out well. And LUFC Data put out a tweet yesterday with some stats on it, and I think he's conceded 5 goals from 5 shots, the 5 first shots that he's faced this season, which on the road for Leeds has cost us points. And then you look at the whole City game, and he's culpable for all 3 goals, definitely for 1, and just some other blame that can go around the rest of the team for the other 2 goals, but he's definitely still has blame in there. What do Leeds do coming into this window, James? Because bringing in a goalkeeper at this time could rock the apple cart completely. We saw it with Kiko Casilla when he came in, and that didn't really work out with the promotion season before we got promoted. There's been a lot of talk about what Leeds do at Meslier. There's a story in the Daily Mail the other day saying that Leeds are open to offers for the goalkeeper. What they get from now remains to be seen, but that Leeds will be looking to bring in an experienced goalkeeper. And there's a couple of stories flowing around today and tonight about mixed reports of whether that will happen or not. But what do you think Leeds will do or will look to do? And what have you heard about the situation? Full stop.
It's complicated. First of all, it is complicated. I do believe Leeds are open to replacing Meslier long term. I'd be surprised, staggered in fact, if it happened in January. I think Farke's well aware of the mistakes that he's made. In the short term, we've got the Harrogate game coming up next, and I think Carl Darlow was always going to play in that game anyway. So it's the ample opportunity really to test him, and if he has a good game, or is a safe pair of hands at least against Harrogate, then you would hope or think he'll keep his place for the Sheffield Wednesday game the following weekend. That really is a chance for Darlow to stake his claim. Now, whether Leeds look beyond that and think about a loan signing, perhaps. You mentioned Kiko Casilla, obviously didn't work out. I think the right character coming in would work wonders for our defence. I looked at, it was highlighted quite well across social media, but the players' reaction to that mistake at Hull told its own story. Joe Roden screaming blue murder at him, all the swear words under the sun. He turned the air blue, and quite rightly, because it was an absolute stinker. So I think there's an element of perhaps the players might now be thinking, look, boss, you've got to think about a better keeper here, because ultimately this might cost us, and potentially behind closed doors there might be a few chats being had about that. But Farke's no mug. He will know himself what is at stake here and the mistakes he's making and how they're costing us. So I think the club will be keeping an eye out. Do I think we'll sell Meslier? No, I don't think so. But I think long term down the line, perhaps in the summer, that could happen. In the short term, Darlow for the immediate. After that, and for the rest of this window, I think possibly they'll start looking at loan deals, maybe a Premier League signing on loan if there's a bench warmer there, third choice in the Prem. But in Farke's words, it'd have to be better than what they've already got. And there's not too many of them around. So it's a really difficult one. But I think for the morale of the team, the fact that I saw heads drop after what happened at Hull, and it just, once that second goal went in and he dropped that mistake, there was that horrible air of inevitability that the third, you just knew it was coming after that, because just the momentum shift at that particular point. So I think for the morale of the team, and to a certain extent, Mellier's protection, I think he needs taking out the fire line a little bit as well. take him out. Let's, if we can get a loan in, but in the short term, give Darlow a run, because I know people don't rate him, but let's not forget he's a Wales keeper at the moment, and he's got a pretty good pedigree, having played in the Premier League for Newcastle. So I'm sure there's a good goalkeeper in there, albeit a rusty one. So I would be inclined, at the very least, to be giving him a go right now.
Yeah, I think the easy route here is you play Darlow against Harrogate, because it was seen as a shoe-in anyway. And if he has a decent game there, then it's easy to leave him in for Sheffield Wednesday. And as you say, I mean, there's the personal element of this as well. I don't want to see a 24-year-old getting absolutely battered on social media, because that's going to have a hell of an impact on your mental health. You never want to see that either. But there is the professional side of the game that Leeds really do need to look at. And Farke talks an awful lot, James, about the fact that Leeds need to be ruthless and Leeds need to be clinical. To you, do you think he brings the same ruthlessness into his decision making in the dressing room, because he's been a bit hesitant to make big changes?
Yeah, I think he is a little bit hesitant. I think there's an element of him. He doesn't hang his players out to dry, which is, I think, hugely important and a good characteristic in a manager. I mean, it would have been far too easy to just say, yeah, the keeper's naff, he's cost us, I need to get rid. He's not going to do that. No manager worth their salt does that anyway. Across world football, it just doesn't happen. But in terms of being ruthless, yeah, I think he needs to probably take a bit of advice from the team, from the squad, his coaches, the goalkeeping coaches. They're not daft. Mellier's been in that team just shy of 5 years now. He looked brilliant when he first came in. And in my opinion, that is a keeper who has stagnated, if not gone backwards. And that's a real shame to see, because I think there's a great ability there. Shot stopping, terrible. Command of the area isn't great. His distribution, I don't know what has happened to that. He used to be very sort of authoritative with the long ball. He's not too bad with a short pass. He's comfortable with the ball at his feet, playing it out to Rodon, who will sort of move square for him, and they play it down the line to Bogle. That works well. He's fine with the short balls, if you like, but the long passes, he used to be able to ping them. I don't know if that's a confidence thing or the shape Leeds have. I think Meslier needs to be taken out of the firing line. It's for his mental health as much as anything, and for Leeds' promotion prospects. And Farke, he needs to be ruthless.
Yeah, he's pretty, as I mentioned there about his substitutions, he's pretty structured when it comes to that. They seem to be pre-planned changes, and they kick in from the 70th minute. And we've got to the point now we're making jokes 3 minutes before 70, saying we're almost subs the clock time right now. So he's been a bit, again, structured in that, where sometimes you want to see him break from the mold and make decisions based on what he's seeing actually happening in front of him in the game. And I would agree with what Karen was saying there. I thought the game management was a little bit too slow against Hull to look like a flagging Leeds side that looked like it needed a few fresh legs on the park, and we didn't get them on. But that's behind us. But we have a big second half for our season, James, and a big January ahead of us to see if Leeds can do anything. But I wanted to kind of just delve into a few bits and just talking about the exits and covering what TeamTalk have put out this year. And the big ones at a striker position, because Joe Gelhardt looks, for all intents and purposes, like he will leave Leeds in January. But it seems to be a toss-up between him and Pat Bamford. And has any hopes of Pat Bamford leaving in January gone away with the latest hamstring injury, or have you heard anything different?
No, I think Pat will stay. I think he's very much in the same position as Meslier, in that he's a position or a player they'll review come the summer. Right now, it's difficult to shift him. He's got 18 months left on his deal. And I think that the wages he was on, he signed that contract at the peak of his powers, just before his England cap, when we're in the Premier League. And obviously that was incentivified in when Leeds dropped. His salary dropped as well, but he's still one of Leeds' highest earners. He's on huge wages in the Championship. The level of player he's at now, it's going to be very, very difficult to find a team who'll take that on. Or, maybe Leeds could subsidise it, cover some percent of the wages, but then what do they gain by doing that? Joffe, however, a different kettle of fish, really. He's really, unfortunately, stagnated. He's dropped to effectively 4th in the pecking order, 5th perhaps. So his game time's extremely limited. TeamTalk understands there's definitely solid interest in his future. There's inquiries from Hull. Rangers have been sniffing around, QPR, Cardiff. So quite a few options for him. He is a bit of a home bird, though. I know that much. He's very close to his mother in the Wigan area. So I think ideally, if he was to take a loan, it might be one whereby He could stay within close to his roots. So perhaps across the northwest, maybe Hull might work. It's not that much of a commute. So that one would make a great deal of sense. I think the Rangers move for him might be interesting, but whether he'd take that, I don't know. But for me, and from, I think, a Leeds point of view, it's one or the other. It's either Pat or it's Joffy. It won't be both. And Joffy looks the more easier to shift and probably the one more in need of game time.
Yeah, I mean, he appeared on the bench against Hull because Bamford was injured, but before that, he hasn't been on the bench since the Bristol City game. So it's a huge amount of time out of the squad completely. And you don't like to see young players' careers stagnating. He had such a huge amount of promise when he started off with us, and you thought this is the next Wayne Rooney and everything else that was said about him. But like Melia, he seems to just regressed a little bit, maybe just struggling to find his place in this lineup. And sometimes different manager styles just don't gel with certain types of players. So he needs to find one that does. And the whole one makes perfect sense. It's right across the road. He stays in the Championship. He can prove himself, and it's at a team that he'll probably get in. But as you say, the Rangers one is the interesting one for me because he'd be going playing for a side who are going to win most weeks. And that would be a different challenge from might actually showcase his ability and get his confidence levels up a little bit higher than going down to a side that are struggling this season, albeit have a new manager now. James, the other one that's floating around right now, and it's probably the pops up every 6 months, but it's Junior Firpo's future at the club. He's now able to negotiate a pre-contract agreement with any club outside of the UK to head off if he wants to. There has been nothing but constant speculation around Real Betis dipping in. They love a discounted Leeds signing. Seems for all intents and purposes like that could be the direction. Leeds, to my knowledge so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, haven't put a contract on the table for the player yet. And it looks like he will head off. But what have you heard on Junior Firpo's situation, and what have you heard on talks between his camp and Betis as well?
Yeah, nail on the head there, because I think Leeds know they're thinking down the line here. Hopefully we'll be a Premier League team. Is Junior Firpo part of what a Premier League lineup would be? You know what? He's done really well in the Championship under Farke. But maybe that's his level. Unfortunately, the step up we've seen before, he got absolutely roasted week in, week out. And the thought of him now against Mo Salah or Kulusevski would be absolutely petrifying, let's be honest. So I think for Leeds and Junior Firpo, as good as he's been over the last maybe sort of 12 months, I think it's probably the end of the line for him, unfortunately. This season, I think it'll be a free exit come the summer. The only thing that might change that would be if Leeds were still a Championship team. They might think you're worth another deal, but it'd be on reduced terms again. But really, would he hang around when he's got the chance to move to Real Betis? It's a club he knows well. La Liga, obviously, nice lifestyle in Andalusia. So I would not blame him at all for taking that move. As it stands, Leeds haven't offered him a contract. So I think there's an element of wait and see, but obviously the longer it goes on and the fact that there's just silence from Leeds would probably tell him the writing's on the wall.
Yeah, you would imagine once you get to this stage, if you haven't had something put in front of you, I think he has said as well that there hasn't even been conversations about it. I think you kind of start to plan your next move, and it's not a bad move either, heading, as you say, handing off to Andalusia in Spain to enjoy the lovely weather and the better climate and lovely food and everything else, and avoid the winters that we have up here in the UK and Ireland. So yeah, that would be one for him. And I agree with you, and everyone says as well, he's been very good in the Championship. But we saw Junior Firpo in the Premier League, and we saw the defensive capabilities, and Leeds will need to be more defensive if they do get there next year, based on what they're going to walk into, and then based on what Leicester, Ipswich and Southampton have looked like this year. If they've gone up, the gap is huge. So that's interesting. I was going to ask you Jack Harrison, but I'm not going to bother because there's no chance that he comes back to Leeds, just given the way things are at the moment. We'll just bypass that one completely. But on the income and stuff, a centre-back has been mentioned a lot. There's lots of names floating around. There's been players that linked with Manchester City and Leeds have been mentioned as well, which is crazy. But one name that keeps popping up is Nico Elvedi from Russia Mönchengladbach, a centre-back that, for me, is a Premier League signing and probably not a Championship level signing, given his pedigree, over 300 appearances in the Bundesliga, but has a relationship with Daniel Farke. So if there is any truth in this, might be the kind of player that could actually come in and play games with Leeds, because Farke doesn't need to build up trust with him. He knows him, he's managed him, he knows what he get from him, and there's a possibility there. Do you know if there's any truth in the Elvedi story, or what would your thoughts be on that move?
He's certainly a player Leeds have looked at. As you say, Farke knows him very well from his Gladbach days. So there's definitely a connection there. And I think there has been conversations held between Leeds and his agent. The problem from his point of view is, again, he doesn't want to drop down to the Championship. So I think it's going to be one of those wait and see moves. I'd be amazed if he moved now. He's, a Swiss international, really good pedigree. But I think one that Leeds would probably say, we'll slate this back for the summer if you're still interested. But right now, I'd be surprised if he moved into the Championship. Never say never. Farke's a persuasive man, and there's a connection there. And the fact conversations have been held will stand us in good stead. But no, I don't think it's one we'll be doing this month. I could be wrong. I'd always say this as a sports journalist. What you say today can be right today, but can be wrong tomorrow. Things move very, very quickly in the window. As it stands, I don't think we'll sign him. But then you don't know what might happen with this situation at Gladbach. They might say, yeah, you're free to move, find a new club. Things change very, very quickly at this time of the year. So as it stands, I would say no, probably not this month, but down the line, quite possibly a summer signing for Leeds, yes.
Yeah, he does look like that level and that pedigree to be a Premier League player, and not so much. It'd be a hell of a coup to get him in the Championship. But again, whether it's needed or not remains to be seen. I mean, Bamadelli's been mentioned as well as a loanee possibly coming in, but that looks like it's covered for the right-hand side. Louis Barry's been mentioned as an attacker that came from TeamTalk as well. But that, to me, seems a move that will probably go somewhere else due to the fact that Villa will want him to have minutes as part of his development. What have you got on that one?
Yeah, exactly right. Villa have recalled him, obviously, from Stockport. He's been unbelievable there, but I think there's a sense that League One's far too lower level for him. So they've recalled him. They want him to get minutes in the Championship. Completely understandable. Leeds had been looking at a deal. They'd not gone as far as inquiring or anything like that, but he's a player we were told we were looking at, sorry. But the latest information we have from our transfer insider at TeamTalk is that it's actually Derby who've made the firmest move. So they're the team sniffing around him right now. Frank Lampard and Coventry are also looking. And I think from Villa's point of view, they'll want to send him to a team where he's guaranteed minutes to play at this level. It's not so much about joining a winning side. If he came to Leeds, he's in a fight, really a straight fight with Aronson for a shirt. And, I think Farke has his favourites. I don't think he'll be replacing Aronson anytime this season soon. Down the line, that's another question. But I can't see Louis Barry being one that leads square off, because it's just not one that suits all parties.
Yeah, it's it just makes sense to go and play minutes. Leeds have an issue with this, and it's not an issue. They do the right thing by not guaranteeing anybody game time, because you have to come in, back yourself, work for it. And that's the right way to do things. But you do miss out on one or two of these kind of players who want that guaranteed time. But I think we're doing the right things. But whether it leaves us short or not will remain to be seen. James, in terms of what Leeds will do in this window, again, we've told it's a quiet window. Farke really wanted a number 10 in the summer, to the point where he was very public in the final week about wanting a 10 that he hadn't mentioned previous in his interviews. He'd said he wanted 4, he got 4, and then he wanted a 10, and that didn't happen. Was he speaking out of term on that during the summer, or is that something that Leeds will seriously revisit in this window? And what do you think Leeds will actually go and try and do in this window, if anything?
If anything, it'll be loan signings, I think. A couple of smart signings to complement what we already have. Potentially a centre-half, potentially a number 10 if the right one became available. But I think Leeds are quite smart. They know the type of player they want isn't really available. So, it's a catch-22. What are we going to get the players we want? I don't think so. So there's a sense of let's wait and see. If we're in a Premier League team, we're a Premier League team. But can we afford to do that? I don't think so. I think a couple of additions, smart additions, even if loan arrivals, loans with a view to becoming permanents, they'd be ideal if they can improve on what we've got, add depth to the squad, and just give the manager something to think about. You want players kept on their toes, don't you? That's the key to a successful squad, is players having to fight for the positions. Yeah. I think Farke got the balance really, really nice over the Christmas period by interchanging his wingers. I thought, whereas previously he's maybe been a little bit stubborn and not really rotated his squad, but I think he did a really good job, like moving the wingers around for that busy Christmas period. So that's one position, the wings, where we're fully covered. You could argue we'd benefit from strength in depth, maybe in centre half. maybe as a number 10. A number 10 would be a dream, but I think it's beyond us because the type of level of player we want to get. Buendia, you mentioned at the top of the show, perfect example, but he's not going to drop down. Come the summer, you know, Leeds are a Premier League team, let's say, Buendia's still on the market, then yeah, quite possibly there's a chance there. But I mean, you're talking £75,000 a week for a player of his ilk. And Villa have said if he's loaned out, they want 100% loan coverage. We're not in a position to do that in the Championship. But if the right deal becomes available and the right player's there, definitely a loan. See us over. 2 or 3 smart loans is what I would try and do from a Leeds point of view, definitely.
People are asking about Max Verber. Is he on his way? I'd be honest with you, when I saw the Alvede Gladbach link, I was thinking, nice little fancy swap there would go down quite well, but I don't think Verber goes anywhere. And then the news so far on the Berisha deal that came out yesterday is that the report is not true. Yorkshire Evening Post have said that they've been told it's wide of the mark, so that one will sit. James, do you think we'll do anything in January, or will we be sitting at the end of January crossing our fingers and toes that nobody gets injured?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick my neck on the line. I think we'll do a couple of loans. Number 10 would be a dream. I think it's beyond us. I think we'll get a centre half. Not sure who. Centre half who can cover right back. Centre half would be ideal. And then beyond that, potentially a keeper. If they're not looking at a keeper, then quite frankly, they're a bit daft. But they should be looking to bring in a new keeper without a doubt. And if we can get that done, a keeper and a centre half, I'd be content enough. I think a number 10 would be beyond us, but certainly something we would 100% visit in the summer.
Brilliant. James, massive thank you for taking time out of your day today to have a chat with us. I really appreciate you coming on that. Thanks to everyone in the comments in the chat for getting involved as well. Everyone's saying the same thing. Quiet window, but get a 10 in a keeper or get a 10 in a centre defender. We're good. I personally think he'll play Brendan Aronson until his legs fall off, and then he'll have to do something about it. But I wouldn't mind a 9, a different profile of 9 for different types of games. But again, as you say, I think I'll just wish into the wind and hope that something happens. I don't see it actually happening, but I think we'll do 1 or 2. I still think we'll do 1 or 2. But anyway, James, massive thanks and best luck for the rest of the year. We'll catch up with you hopefully during the course of the year as well. I really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone again. And I will be back in the morning for the news, and then we'll have previews with stats during the week for the game against Harrogate at the weekend. So enjoy the rest of your evening, folks, and I'll talk to you soon. See you. Bye.